Hi there, I'm Michelle the Painter from Berkshire Paint and Sip, and this is Paint and Sip at Home. Alright, so today I'm going to be painting Lovelock and I'm going to be sipping on my coffee. And if you enjoy this process, I do hope that you like and subscribe to my channel and that you also check out my Patreon page where you can find additional painting perks. So let's get painting and let's get sipping. Alright, so for my materials today, I'm going to be using a stretched and primed 16 by 20 inch canvas. If you're painting along with me, you can certainly switch up the size, but that's what I'm going to be using. I'll be using acrylic paint today. My colors are titanium white, cobalt blue, Mars black, deep yellow, green oxide, burnt umber, which I'll call brown, and fluorescent orange. And of course, you can switch up those colors if you'd like, but that's what I'll be using. For my tools today, I have a white piece of chalk that I'll be using for drawing later, and I have 3 brushes. I have a 1/2 inch wide flat bristle brush. I have a number 10 round synthetic brush, and I have a number 1 round synthetic brush, and I will refer to these as small, medium, and large as we go through the painting process. And of course you can switch those up as well if you'd like to, but that's what I'll be using. If you're painting along with me, you'll probably want to have a cup of water for washing your brushes, as well as a paper towel for drying your brushes. And down below this video, I will be providing you with a couple of additional resources that can help you through your painting process. One of them is a link where you can purchase the same exact paint kit that I'm using, from the large canvas to the same kind of paint and that fancy palette I use, and everything in between is all in the kit for you. So that's there. There's also a link where you can download a free image of the final painting. So you can print that and use it as visual reference as you go through the painting process. And there's also written step-by-step instructions down there for you as well. And that's all we're going to need today. Alright, so what we're going to do for the first step is we're going to be painting our sky. I'm going to be using a large bristle brush. The colors I'm using are black, blue, white, orange, and yellow. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to be using a darker version of my blue up at the top. I'm going to get my sky to go really light as it comes down towards the bottom, and then I'll add some sunset colors to it, or sunrise. I'm thinking this is a sunset though. So how I'm going to start this is I'm going to start with blue, a little bit of black, and a little bit of white on my brush. So mostly blue with a little bit of black and a little bit of white on my brush. I'm starting up at the top, just going to give myself a left to right kind of brush stroke in through here. I will not pick up black again. I'm just going to be picking up blue and white on my brush. I guess I had a little bit of black on my palette but in that section, but I'm going to be picking up blue and white for a little while just to get this sky to transition into the shade of blue that I would like. And then as I'm coming down my sky, what's going to end up happening is my sky will naturally get lighter and lighter because that black or the darker blue that I started with will start to work itself off of my brush. So right now I'm still just picking up blue and white, but I'm starting to pick up a little bit more white on my brush as I'm coming down here. And I am just using a left to right, almost like a kind of crisscross type of brush stroke, so that way these colors will merge together. Maybe it'll end up looking like a little bit of a, gentle clouds going by. So you can kind of imagine it however you'd like to. And now I'm going to start using mostly white with just a teeny tiny bit of blue on my brush. So this way it will definitely start to get lighter and lighter as I come down my canvas. I'm looking for it to be really, really light in through this kind of center down lower section. So right now I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just picking up white and letting that blue kind of really work its way off of my brush. If at this point you're going about this and you're like, oh my god, I still see so much blue coming off my brush, or maybe you even have a lot of black still left on your brush, you can certainly either wipe your brush off on your paper towel, just give it a good squeeze in there, or you could wash and dry your brush. So I'm just opting to just wipe my brush off on my paper towel, and you can see, I still have some blue working its way off of my brush right now, which is exactly what I'm intending to do because I want this sky to have a natural kind of gradient as it's coming down towards what would be the horizon. We're not really going to have a distinct horizon line per se, but I am just getting this to go off in the distance and give it some atmospheric dimension as it's coming down the canvas. So I'm just about down to the bottom now, and I have a very light background, which is exactly what I wanted to achieve. And once I've got this entire area covered in, what I'm going to do is I will add some orange and yellow on top of this in order to give it the illusion of some sunset kind of colors in my atmosphere. So I've got this pretty well finished the way that I want. So now I'm just going to kind of wipe my brush off on my paper towel. My canvas is still wet, which is exactly what I want it to be. So I'm picking up orange and a little bit of yellow on my brush at the same time, and I'm just going to kind of introduce some of these beautiful sunset colors into this bottom portion of my canvas. You can do it more on the left and the right or more in the center, whatever you'd like to do. I'm going to kind of bring them about halfway up my canvas in just a gentle kind of way. I don't necessarily need it to be over colored or over saturated with these yellow and orange, but if you wanted yours to be more intense and have more drama to it, you could certainly do that. But I'm just kind of lightly bringing it up and blending it in with some of these sky colors, maybe bringing this in just a little bit higher up and through here. And then we are going to be utilizing our chalk for the next step. So once you've got this beautiful sky created, you can certainly do any little tweaks that you want. If you want to do a second layer, feel free to do so, but whenever you're ready, you can put this large brush away, take out your chalk, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to draw an outline for our lock and our key. So I'm going to be using my chalk. I do want to forewarn you though that before you start this step that you make sure that your canvas is dry, because it'll be easier to draw on a dry canvas. So this is that time where you can take that extra long break if you'd like to. Or you can find some kind of fun fanning method to get it dry, or you can do as I did and just whip out your blow dryer to get it dry. I'm going to give you a couple of markers. We'll connect those markers, and by the time we have this done, we'll have a basic shape of a lock and a key. And just keep in mind, you can certainly do yours in a different shape than mine. Feel free to alter it as you see fit. So the first thing that I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be drawing a horizontal line for the top of my lock. So I've got this about in through this area. So this is about a third of the way down my canvas. To figure out where a third of the way is, if you kind of eyeball your halfway point, then you eyeball halfway between there and the top of your canvas, it's somewhere in between those two. And then I'm going to come in, I would say almost 2 inches or like 1.5 inches to 2 inches, somewhere in through there, make myself a little bit of a marker. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to come down about a third of the way and in maybe, I don't know, 1 inch and almost 2 inches, make myself a little bit of a marker. And of course, if you wanted to make sure that you had these at the same height, you could take like your brush or some kind of measuring tool and measure how far down you did this one, and then go to the opposing side and make it at about the same height. And then what we're going to do is we're going to connect those two with a horizontal line, something like this. Then what I'm going to do is I am going to create myself the arcing part of the lock, the locking mechanism is what I'll call it. I'm going to come in here maybe about 1 inch, 1.5 inches, do the same thing on the right side, and then I'm going to connect those two. I'm going to bring it up to maybe about 1 inch away from the top of my canvas, something like this. And of course, we're using chalk, so if you feel that you needed to make any modifications, you can certainly feel free to do so. And then what I'm going to do is I'll fix that. You can fix that with a little bit of water, and we're going to be painting over it anyways. I just put water on my brush. You can take water and just kind of erase your little bit of a chalk mark if you need to or want to. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the bottom of my canvas. I'm going to make a couple of marks about 3 inches in from the right and the left side. So I've got myself a mark right here, and I've got myself a mark right here. What I'm going to do is I'll connect here to here and here to here, but what I want to do is I'm going to do just a horizontal or a vertical line that's going to stay about the same width away from my canvas on this side until I'm maybe about 2 or 3 inches away from the bottom, and then I'll curve it in. So I'm going to take my chalk, I'm going to just ride it down about the same distance away from the edge of my canvas until I get, I would say, right about here, and then I'm just going to kind of curve it in towards that marker. And then I'll do the same thing over on the left hand side. So just ride it down like this, and then when you're about in this vicinity in through here, then you can just kind of curve it and hit in through there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself the internal area of the opening for the lock. So I'm going to come in from here maybe about 1 inch at the bottom, and same thing on the right, maybe about 1 inch somewhere in through there. This is a kind of a floating opening. You can really have yours as big or as small as you want, but these will be my end points up at the top. I'm gonna come about 1 inch away from the top in through here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make myself like a semicircle and then a diagonal line. So I'm gonna take it from here. I'm gonna make this semicircle, or like about, 3/4, or I don't know, 1/3 of a circle, something like this. And then I'm gonna just bring this down at an angle to here. And I'll try and emulate the same type of shape over on the right hand side. So I can see that I didn't come as far over as here. So I know that kind of gives me a gauge what to do on the right side, that I don't go as far over as that. I come about the same height in through here, and then I just bring this down in a diagonal. And of course you can modify that all you want. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a circle in the center of this, something like this, and then I'll draw a vertical line coming down about to, oops, I just dropped my chalk right in my water. So my chalk is right now inside my water. So I'm going to grab another little remnant piece of chalk that I have in my tray to finish this up. So I brought this right to here, and then I'm just going to give myself a little bit of an arcing line right in through here. This is going to represent the little hill that our people are going to sit on. And that is all I'm going to do for my outline. So I'm going to put my chalk away, take out my medium brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the base coat for our lock. I'm going to be using my medium brush. The colors I'm using are black, white, and yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pre-mix myself what I'm going to refer to as like a brass or a copper kind of color, kind of like silvery, goldy kind of color. A metallic type of color is what I'm going for. So how I'm going to do this, I have pre-mixed myself a little bit here so you can kind of see where I'm headed. What I've done is I've taken my yellow and I add a little bit of black to it. So it almost is like a greenish type of color, and then I add a little bit of white to it. So in essence, I'm going gray with a little bit of yellow in it, and that's going to give me this kind of like a goldy metallic type of color. You can steer it if you want it to be more like brass. You could put a little bit of the orange into it. If you wanted it to be more on the golden side, you could put more yellow into it. I'm just kind of going middle of the road, maybe an antique type of color. So you can certainly make yours whatever you'd like. Once we add the colors of the surroundings on top of this for a reflective type of effect, the base color is not going to be super duper important, but it still will add to that effect of it looking like a metallic lock, which is really cool. So I've got my color that I am shooting for in through here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to color in the entire shape with this color. So you could certainly use your larger brush if you wanted to in these larger areas, but I'm opting to use this brush so I can kind of give myself some cleaner lines around the edges. You could also, as you're working around the edges, you could use a little bit of water on your brush at the same time. So what the water is going to do is going to provide you with a smoother line as it's meeting the sky. So I can utilize a little bit of water on my brush to keep that paint nice and fluid as I am going around the edges. And that's just kind of my trick. My trick is, you know, I know that the paint is going to absorb better into my canvas when it has that moisture to it. So for me, getting these clean lines around the edges, I like to do it with a little bit of water on my brush, and that way it allows me to get those clean lines. And if the paint ends up too thin where I can, or translucent where I can see through it, then I can just come back and do a second coat on top of it. But at least by doing this first layer with a little bit of water, it ensures that I get those nice clean edges to it. And it doesn't have to be exactly as, you know, one side doesn't have to be exactly the same proportion as the other side, because maybe we're looking at this from an angle. So if when you did your outline, if your outline looked a little bit bigger on one side or smaller on the other side, that's quite all right. And if you don't get a 100% full coverage on this coat, don't worry about it, because we're going to be doing a second layer to this entire, oops, I'm going to make a mess right in through here. We're going to do a second layer to the entire lock. So know that if your first layer is not perfect, that's okay, because when we go to add all of that other information on the second go around, we'll be able to paint in or fill in any spots that may have not been fully executed or fully painted this first time around. So I'm just kind of going around the outline and then just filling in the inside. And again, when I do the outline, I am dipping my brush in water before I go to pick up my paint. So what I do, so you guys can have a visual, is I take my brush like this and just dip it in my water, and then I go ahead and pick up some of my paint. So that way I'm ensured a nice fluid process. And I'm using a pretty big brush too for this type of step. So the size of my brush is going to allow me to hold quite a bit of moisture within my brush. And again, it doesn't need to be super fluid, but if you can get a little bit of fluidity in your bristles, that's going to help you to get those cleaner lines as you're going about it. And I also have a shaky or non-steady hand, so when I go to do those edges, I am resting my hand on my canvas or on something. Sometimes I rest it on my easel, sometimes I rest it on my canvas to just stabilize my hand so I can get a smoother line around those edges. So I just got this little section left to go, and then I'll do the handle part or the locking mechanism up at the top. We're going to be using the same color for the main coat of the key, but I want to use a smaller brush to do that, so we'll do that in the next step. So I'm just getting this area colored in here, and then when I go to do the locking mechanism, it is a little bit smaller of an area, but I still want it to look pretty wide and have some good width to it in order for it to look like it would definitely work with this big lock that we're doing. So I am still going to use this this medium brush to create this this area up in through here, just kind of stabilizing my hand a little bit, pushing a little bit harder just so I can get a pretty good line as I'm going down that area. And maybe I can get it in one shot, maybe not, but we're going to try and just kind of push my brush so I'm having mine maybe about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 of an inch wide, this area in through here. And again, it doesn't have to look exactly like the other side, but once you get this all nice and done, do any little tweaks that you want, and then we are going to be utilizing our small brush for the next step. So you can put this medium brush away wherever you'd like to, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're doing the base coat of our key. I'm going to use my small brush, and I'm going to be using that same color that we pre-mixed the metallic color from before. So all I'm going to do is I'm really just going to be initially just outlining where I have already designated this to go. And again, I am using kind of a watered down or water on my brush with this color, so that way I can get my smooth lines. I may end up having to do, you know, multiple layers just to get it to be as painted in as I want, but that fluidity on my brush again is going to provide me with a smoother line as I'm doing this. And you can have your key as thick or as thin as you want as far as the width of the metal part. That's going to be totally up to you. Maybe you customize it after a key that you have seen or you have, or you know, whatever works for you. I'm going to go ahead and do that circle. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the vertical line that we had established initially. So just kind of bringing this all the way down to what's going to be my hill where my couple is sitting on. And I'm making mine maybe about 1/4 of an inch wide. You could certainly make yours wider or more narrow, wherever your comfort zone is when it comes to this. And it doesn't have to be totally perfect. This could be an old weathered key that has some imperfections on it. It could be a shiny brand new one, wherever you'd like to make it. So I'm going to do some decorative elements in the center as well as the little key part down at the bottom. My decorative element, I'm going to start with a heart in the center. You could certainly, again, make yours into whatever you'd like it to be, but I'm going with the whole love theme in through here. So I'm going to start with just a heart in the center, something like this. And I'm designing mine kind of after just like wrought iron, maybe iron work on a fence, or, you know, that type of decorative ironwork that is just so pretty and kind of ornate looking. And then what I'm going to do, I want this to kind of look a little symmetrical, so I'm going to bring maybe a line down the center of my heart like this. And again, you can certainly design yours as you see appropriate. Then I'm going to take this and just kind of give myself a little swirly mark. I'm going to try and make mine again symmetrical, so similar from one side to the other, but you could certainly make yours asymmetrical and have one side much different than the other. That's going to be, again, a comfort level on your part. I'm going to take this and maybe extend this over to here. The whole key, no pun intended, or a little pun intended, is that whatever design element you have, it has to kind of connect to the edge or the sides of it. You can't just have a floating decoration in the middle. It's got to kind of connect or be attached to these edges of the key, because it's got to maintain like that it's one piece that is all connected. And then I'm going to go ahead and do a couple down in through here. And again, you can have your design whatever you'd like it to be. It will probably morph into something much different looking than mine. And again, that's what's going to make it look nice and individual to who you are and how you want to represent this lock and key in your own creation. And I'm just kind of bringing this over, and I'm just kind of watching what I did on the other side. Mine is not perfect, but it's, you know, similar from one side to the other, so it's giving the illusion of maybe it's handmade or something. And then I would just kind of keep tweaking my lines until I get them into where I want. I'm going to do the little key portion down below. So this can be in any formation, a couple of teeth coming out the side. It can have, you know, spaces in between the teeth. They can be different lengths. They can have different angles to them. You can have, you know, a little maybe curve coming out the bottom. Really just have fun with how you want this shape to be and just fill it in as you see fit. And then we are going to be utilizing this same small brush, or actually no, we're going to use our large brush for the next step. So once you've got this done, you can put your small brush away, take out your large brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're painting our little hill that our people are going to be sitting on. So I'm using my large bristle brush. You could certainly use your medium brush for this as well if your area is really small and your bristle brush might be too big for your section, but if you feel like it's going to work, go ahead and use the big brush, because that's what I'm using. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be applying my paint with a dotting or a stippling type of technique. Let me just move this so we can see it a little bit better. I'm going to be dark at the bottom and work my way towards light at the top. There's not much area to go, so I'm going to be switching colors really quickly to get that progressive lightness towards the top. I'm going to use my large brush. I'm going to be using black, green, yellow, and white. And how I'm going to start this is I'm starting with a little bit of black and green on my brush at the same time. I'm going to be dotting at the bottom of my hill, really at the bottom of the hill. You don't need to go too far up, maybe just about a half of an inch or so, getting it nice and dark down at the bottom, maybe a little bit more over in through here, all the way to the edges where your lock is over on the edges. And I don't want it to go all the way black because I'm going to have a shadow from my people. So if you make this all black, you won't be able to see the shadow. So I'm just going to kind of make sure that I don't go too dark. I haven't reloaded my brush, just kind of getting this paint on here. And now I'm going to go into green and yellow without washing my brush to get this to go a little bit lighter as I'm going towards the top of my hill in through here. And then at the tippy top, I'm going to be using a bit of yellow and white on my brush at the same time, just to get myself a little bit of light from whatever that atmospheric sunrise or sunset is. You can certainly kind of dictate however bright or dark that you would like that edge to be, but I'm going to put a little bit of lightness. I know my butts of my people are going to be taking up the majority of this area, but just adding that little bits of lightness on the end, on the edge, is going to really give you a nice effect to it. And then we're going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got your grass on here, you can put your large brush away, take out your small brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to do the base coat for our bodies. I'm going to be using my small brush, and I'm going to be using just brown paint. This is going to provide us with a great base coat where we'll be able to build skin and shirts and hair and all that good stuff on top of it. So I am loading my brush up with brown paint. I am going to be depicting a male and a female, but you could certainly go for, you know, a father and a daughter, or two women or two men, or whatever you would like, two sisters. You could do whatever you'd like in this particular depiction, but I'm going to go for a male and a female, and I'm going to have my male a little bit taller than the female. I'm doing my male on the right hand side, so I'm going to come up from my ground maybe about 3.5 inches. I want to save room for the head to be on top, so I'm going to just start with my first marker is going to be right about in through here. I'm going to create a soft rectangle for the shape of the body. So I want to save a little bit of room between my key and my body, and I also want to save a little bit of room between my body and my lock. So I'm going to go something like this. This is going to be his back in through here, and then I'm going to put where his rear end is going to be out just a little bit farther, but you don't have to go super far with it. A male, you know, when they're sitting probably doesn't have as wide of hips per se as a female does, but definitely something that's going to give you the impression that he's sitting. So I'm just kind of rounding it out a little bit at the bottom, and I'm just going to paint this all in with brown paint. Once I've got this main section on in through here, I'm going to put my arms on. So if this is the top of my back, I need to put little shoulders on. So I'm going to bring this out just a little bit from there. I'm going to have this arm is going to be holding on to the key. So for me, the waist is about where the elbow would be. So if I bring this down in through here, my head tells me this is the back of the arm. It's going to come down to about the waist in through, I would say the waist is right about there. So this would represent the elbow. And then I'm going to just kind of put the back of the arm on in through here. And then I'll put what's going to represent the forearm somewhere in through here. I'm leaving a little bit of space between my key and my arm, but you don't necessarily have to do that. And I'm just making sure that this looks to be wide enough as it's going up. I'm going to put a little bit over that key, which you won't really be able to see too much of right now, but this is going to end up being where his hand is going to be. So I'm just putting a little bit around here. This is maybe a little bit higher. Maybe I think that's a little bit too high. I don't think it should be much higher than the shoulder. So I'm just going to move this in this direction like this, and maybe put my hand somewhere in here. And the female's hand is going to kind of be resting on it as well. So I'm just going to put my little shirt on like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and put my elbow on the other side. So it's going to be about the same height from here. I'm just going to make myself a little bit of an elbow coming out in through here, give myself a little bit more of a shoulder. So just representing that in through there. And then I need to put a head on here. And this is going to look much better once we put some dimension on the back of it. So I want to put a little neck somewhere around in through here, and then my head. And these are, you know, they don't have to be, you know, meant to look like photorealistic characters here. You can certainly make these look a little bit more on the illustrative side. I'm not necessarily going for a full photorealistic type of painting here. I'm just really looking for this to give us a really, you know, endearing type of impression that there's these two people who have, you know, become attached with their lock and key, and they are, you know, enjoying life together. And I'm just kind of making sure this head looks to me like it would fit this body, but yours might end up being a little bit different shape. They've got different kinds of hair, so you can certainly, you know, make it resemble somebody that you know. I think I need to bring the head down a little bit in through here, and maybe connect it to that neck, and maybe bring these shoulders, make the shoulders a little bit broader to go a little bit further out than that head. So something like this. And of course you can keep tweaking yours all you want until it gives a good shape or representation. I'm going to put a couple of little ears coming off the back side in through here, so you can see some little extra bit of shape if you want to. And then I'm going to, and again, it'll look much more realistic once we put the other information on there. But right now I'm going to go ahead and move to the female. So for my female, I'm going to have her a little bit shorter. So wherever I've put this neck over here, I'm going to come to the left and maybe down about a half of an inch or so. I'm going to, again, kind of model it similarly where I put the top part of the body. She's going to have a little bit more of a waist as we come down towards the ground. So I'm just kind of bringing this down in this direction, filling in that center area. Gonna get this to kind of bump out a little bit more for her rear end down in through here. So maybe right about there I would put her waist, and then just kind of get it to bump out onto my hill a little bit. And of course you can get yours to overlap on the hill if you want to, or just be represented at the edge of the hill. Whatever works for you is totally fine. I'm going to give her her little arm, so I'm going to bring this out down. I want her hand to kind of be resting on his, so I'm going to just really concentrate on getting that in that vicinity like this, and giving her her elbow somewhere in through here, so she's really kind of just reaching and holding on to his wrist or his hand, something like that. And then the other side, I'm just going to have her arm just kind of down, so I'm just going to make sure she's got her shoulder in through here, bring this kind of down like this, and give her a little bit of an elbow down around her waist area, something like that. Going to give her, she's going to have a bun on top of her head, so I'm going to put her regular head in through maybe here, and then I'm going to put a bun on top of her head. She's going to have a pretty formal type of a hairdo, something like that. Going to give her a little bit of a neck, so something like this. And same thing, I'm going to give her a couple of ears, because she's going to be wearing some earrings, so I'm going to put her little ears coming down in through here. And then we're going to utilize our medium brush for the next step. So once you've got your people put in place here, do any little tweaks and adjustments that you feel necessary, and then you can put your small brush away, take out your medium brush, and get ready for the next step. Alright, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our lock. I'm going to be using my medium brush. I'm going to be using black, my color that I created for the lock itself, that meadow color, blue, orange, yellow, and white. So all of my colors except for green and brown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add shadows, highlights, and I'll call them reflections, because I want this to look like it's a shiny kind of metallic substrate, so I want it to have some reflection of the stuff going on around it, like blue from the sky or the orange from the sky. I'm going to put shadows down below. I'm going to put shadows on part of the inside of this lock entry, little shadows on part of this. Maybe I'll have a little detail work at the top of the lock, and then I'll put some highlights and reflections and all that good stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some black and my base color. So I have black with my base color. I'm going to put some shadow down at the bottom of my lock. So this is going to give you the illusion that it kind of dips down and has some form to it. So I'm just adding a little bit of black, and then I'm going to rub it in with my regular or that base color. So it doesn't have to be a perfect gradient or anything like that. I'm just getting it to blend in so it looks nice and natural, but again, we're not going for photorealism here, so you can have it just kind of blend in a non-perfect way. And this is an old lock, so it doesn't have to be all smooth and super shiny. I'm going to do the same thing over on this side here, so just adding a little bit of black at the bottom, getting it to blend in as it comes up the lock itself. So I'm going to pick up some of my lock color, that silvery brass kind of color, and getting that to just kind of blend in as it goes up. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to still have a little bit of black on my brush. I'm going to add a little bit of detail right in through here. So this will be a little bit of a shadow underneath maybe a piece that sticks out. I'm going to pick up a little bit of black, put a little shadow on the inside edge of this part of the lock in through here. So this is going to give the illusion of it being a little bit kind of three-dimensional along the edges. I'll do the same thing on the inside edge over in through here. So just a little bit of black is giving me this interior kind of shadow, giving it a little bit of a three-dimensional kind of element. I'm going to put a little bit more shadow on this left-hand side, so that way it kind of steers the viewer to understand that this has a little bit of form to it as well, I'll put a highlight on the other side. Conversely, so a little bit of black, then picking up my original color for the lock to get this to blend in a little bit on this side in through here. I'm going to add a little shadow underneath this top piece, so just picked up a little bit of black on my brush, going to give myself a little bit of a underline kind of area over there, maybe a little bit of black over in through here. Then I'll pick up some of my regular color to get it to blend in a little bit. So what this is going to do is this is going to make these this locking mechanism look like it's got some form to it as well, to make it look a little round. I'm now going to wash and dry my brush to add the highlight and the colored reflections onto it. So I'm washing and drying my brush. I'm going to tackle my reflections first. So I'm putting some blue paint on my brush to put some sky reflection over on this side of my lock. So I'm really just I picked up blue and I'm rubbing it in so it in essence kind of blends in with that background color. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of white paint with blue on my brush at the same time to give it a little bit more brightness up in this upper region in through here, and just get it to blend in with that original metallic kind of color. I'm going to do the same thing with a little bit of blue and white up on the top edge or on part of this piece in through here. So I'm just kind of wisping it back and forth left to right to give it the illusion that there's a little bit of that blue reflection in this piece of metal. I'll do the same thing up on the lock portion. So a little bit of blue and white on my brush. I'm going to just kind of paint in a little bit of the blue reflection on in through here. And if you felt that you needed it to blend in a little bit more, just wipe your brush off on your paper towel, pick up a little bit of that original lock color, and just get it to blend in a little bit. But you don't really need to do a whole heck of a lot to give it that shiny type of appearance, but the paint will dry a little bit darker than it is when it's wet, so you might end up going back and doing a couple of layers. I'm going to just pick up some of my original color just to make sure that this blends in nice and that I've got a good coverage throughout the area. And then I'm going to do on the other side, I'm going to be doing my orange as my, and maybe a little bit of yellow, but yeah, maybe a little yellow, but definitely orange as my reflective color over on the right side. You could certainly carry the reflection of the sky over onto the right side as well. Like maybe I'll put a little bit darker up at the top in through here, but that's going to be your call, however much you want it to carry through the rest of the lock. That's totally up to you. Now I'm going to just wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up some of my orange paint. That's going to be the color that I utilize for my reflection on the right hand side, and I'm just going to kind of get it to blend in with that original color, get it to kind of fade down into where I had my my darker area down below. And then if I need to, I can pick up that original silver brass kind of color to get it to blend in well in through here. And I just want them to kind of look like they're, you know, blending enough for it to not just look like a firm, you know, one streak of that color. So I am just kind of continuing to pick up just a little bit of that orange to make sure that it kind of represents well, and it's going to end up looking nice and shiny by the time that I'm done. Once I got that on there, I'm going to start adding my highlights. So I'm going to put a highlight down this right hand side. So I'm going to use a bit of white on my brush to start, and I'm going to do a real kind of long loose stroke. I'm picking up now my metal color, which is the grayish silvery kind of color, and just getting that highlight to blend in through there. And then I'm just going to kind of keep moving my brush up and down in this long brush stroke, so this way it really ends up taking on the shape, the exterior shape of the lock itself. And if you feel like you need it to blend, pick up some of your original color and just kind of get that to naturally blend in together. I think I need to pick up a little bit of the black to make sure that it blends in down towards the bottom. So I just picked up a bit of black. So this has a gradual type of entry towards the bottom in through there. I'm going to add a little bit of highlight on this piece in through here. So I'm going for a little bit of white on my brush. I'm going to have my highlight more on this side. So again, just kind of pulling that paint so it has a kind of a fading effect as it's dissipating towards the other side of the object. Going to do the same thing up on through here. So I'm going to have this highlight maybe in through here, keeping it in the shape of my object. Put it maybe a little bit over here on the edge. I think I want this to be a little bit brighter, so adding a touch more white in through there. I'm going to put a little bit of a highlight on the inside of this, similarly to how we did the shadow in through here. I'm going to do a highlight in through here. So I'm going white, orange, and yellow on my brush at the same time. And I'm going to provide myself with this internal highlight. I am painting it on the sky as opposed to, well, you can do it on your object a little bit, but it's going to be brighter because your background of your sky is lighter than the background of your object, so of the lock. So if you overhang this a little bit into the sky, you'll have a bright background which will allow that to look much brighter. But if you do it directly on top of here, you might have to do a couple of coats to it. So just a little tip and a little forewarning. And then I'm going to go ahead and do this down this edge in through here. So white, yellow, and my orange are my colors that I'm using for this highlight in through here. I'm going a bit slower to make sure that I kind of stay within my boundaries here. And then we are going to be using our small brush for the next step. So once you've got this highlight on here, I think I want a little bit more highlight over on this side of this mechanism in through here. So it gives this a little bit more form. And once you've got your shape on here and all your highlights and your shadows and your reflection, you can put this medium brush away, take out your painting and trying to keep my brain straight at the same time. Take out your small brush and you can get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to finish our key. I'm using my small brush and I'm using the same colors that I just used in the lock. So it's going to be black, white, blue, yellow, and orange, and my original gray color as well, or metal color. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to be following what I did in the lock itself. So I have shadow on the left side and highlight on the right side of each object. So shadow, highlight. So on my key, I'm going to have shadow on the left side of these pieces and highlight on the right side of the pieces. And then I'll do some reflective colors as well. So I know that I have a very small area to work in, so that's why I'm using my small brush, but I want my paint to be really nice and fluid so I can get some nice clean lines. So I'm taking especially my black, which is where I'm going to start, and I'm putting a little bit of water in it. So I'm just dropping some droplets of water into some of my black paint, which makes it like a nice thin ink consistency, and that will allow me to get some nice skinny lines. So I'm going to start with just down the side, the left-hand side of my key itself. When I get to my hands, I'm going to skip over my hands, and then I'm just going to kind of get into this area in through here and giving just little shadowy areas over on the left-hand side of the key itself. And then you can certainly pick up your original color, the metallic color, and then just get that shadow to blend in, making sure that I've got those little hands skipped or the arms skipped. And then I'm going to do this same shadow all throughout the key itself. While I have that black on my brush, I'm going to be outlining, if I don't get my hand in my paint, in my wet paint. So I'm going to be kind of outlining this left-hand side with a thin black line. So I've got this on the left-hand side, and then all my inner pieces are going to be of a similar thought. So all of these little inner pieces, I'm going to give them a little bit of a shadow on, to me, what would represent the left side of that particular object. So if I've got this little curly Q here, that's the left, and the left is in here. And you might not get it exactly perfect, you know, and have the exact rule followed the whole time, but if you can just in your mind's eye say, okay, the left, you know, what is the left side of this one particular piece? And to me, that would be the left side. And because it is of a scroll type of design, that it's not, it would dissipate like when it goes around a corner. So I've got it something like this, and then I'm just going to kind of keep adding that little black accent on what I perceive to be the left side of each one of these sections. So even over here, I've got this little, of course I'm going really slow right now so I can get that aligned as good as I can with my nice shaky hand, but this you might find is a nice easier process to do. Like if you lay your canvas down flat on a surface, sometimes that makes it easier to do these nice little lines, but I'm just going to kind of do it on the fly here and deal with it if it's not perfect, because that's the beauty of painting. You know, it's from your hand, it's not from a machine, it's not from a camera, so it can have imperfections. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to wash and dry my brush, and I'm going to go in for my highlights, which are going to be on the right hand side. So my highlight, I'm going to use orange, yellow, and white to give maybe a little bit more white than orange and yellow to give myself a highlight. So I've got my highlight over here on my right hand side, and it doesn't have to go all the way to the right. If you want there to look like there's a little bit of form to it, you can bring that highlight a little bit away from the edge, something like this. I'm going to do the same thing up in my keys. I'm kind of holding off on adding the colorful reflection. And when I did the lock, I did my reflections first and then my highlights. I'm kind of holding off on that for here just because I know my reflections are not going to be that dramatic on this, but my highlights are a little bit more important to me. So now I'm going to just take that lighter paint, and it could be, you know, white, yellow, and orange, or it could just be white. Whatever you're feeling is going to work as your highlight color. I'm just kind of getting my paint the way that I want it on my brush. That'll work. Something like that. And I'm just going along that right-hand side of these particular parts. So depending on your background color in this area, if you're finding that you can't really see your highlights because they're too similar to the background color, then just switch it up a little bit. Maybe you add a little bit more white, or a little bit more yellow, or a little bit more orange. Whatever you feel will work in order for you to see it on top of your background, because your background will dictate, you know, if you're going about it and you're like, oh my God, I can't see this highlight, that means it's too similar to your background. So I was kind of thinking I was going to do white for my highlight, but I'm not able to really just see that white as much as I would want to. So I'm utilizing a little bit of the orange and the yellow as well on my brush, so that way we can see the highlight, because there's no sense in putting something there if you can't see it. So I tend to sometimes have to make decisions on the fly if I'm going about something and I'm like, well, I want it to do this, but you know, it's not coming out quite the way that I had envisioned it to. So you make those little tweaks and modifications on the fly. So now that I've got my highlights in through there, I'm going to wash and dry my brush. I'm going to put a couple of little reflections. So my reflection, I definitely want to have some blue and white like this, because to me that made it look really nice and shiny. So I'm going to just kind of add a little bit of blue and white. And this is just a little metallic piece with a bunch of high spots and low spots, so I'm not going to really follow any real rule when it comes to the shiny parts on this. I'm just going to kind of put bits and pieces of these colors throughout it. So there's my blue. Maybe now I go just a little white with, you know, maybe just a little bit of my metal color. This will give me some just little bits of highlights throughout the interior of it. Maybe I put a little bit of my orange on my brush and get a little bit of that orange from the sunset to represent as well. And then we're going to utilize this same brush for the next step. So once you've got your beautiful key all nice and finished, do any little tweaks and modifications that you feel necessary, and we are going to utilize this same brush for the next step, so you can just get ready. All right, so what we're going to do for the next step is we're going to paint our hair and our skin for both of our people. I'm going to be using my small brush. I'm going to be using yellow, orange, white, brown, and black. And how I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to pre-mix myself a skin color, and then I'll be adding some highlights and shadows and some hair and all that good stuff. So I'm going to show you how I achieved my skin color because I've magically pre-mixed it for you. So I'm going somewhere in this vicinity. What I did was I took a little bit of my orange, a little bit of my yellow, about equal parts, a touch of brown, not much brown, and then a little bit of white, and spun them together. So you could certainly turn this into whatever skin color you want. You could have it lighter or darker, or you know, more tan or more white. I tend to utilize my own skin as a as kind of a testing ground or a tool to steer my color in any certain direction. I'm thinking that's looking pretty good. I'm just going to mix both of these together in through here. And once you've got it in the vicinity that you want, just know that because we have done a brown base with that burnt umber, whatever skin color you choose to use is going to look a little bit or take on that brown that's underneath. So you might end up in certain areas doing more than one layer to achieve that brightness to the skin, but I'm going to show you how I am going to tackle mine, and then you can certainly do yours in a similar way if that works. So I know that I want to have some skin on the necks, so I'm going to just utilize this skin color and bring it down. For her, I'm bringing it down a little bit because I'm going to have her wearing a dress that kind of comes down a little bit on the back of her neck, and she's got short hair, so, or not short hair, her hair's pulled up, so I'm just bringing this right into this vicinity. Her arm, she's got a sleeveless dress on, so I'm going to just bring this up to the shoulder, and I'm bringing this down in this vicinity. I'm bringing it all the way to the edge, but I'm leaving a tiny little bit of the brown around the edge just so you can see a little bit of an outline. I'm going to put a shadow back here in a minute, but right now just kind of getting that skin color on. I'm going to do the same thing on the right hand side. So her hand is going to be crossing over or holding on to his hand, but first I want to just kind of get her arm color on in through here. So this will be her elbow in through here, and then her forearm is going to come up in through here. And I'm just painting right on top of what I had before. I'm just giving it this extra color to make it look more like skin. And this would be kind of in the shadow anyways a little bit, so I'm not terribly concerned about making it perfect. His hand is going to be right in through here, which we'll put in a minute, but I'm just going to put her little thumb that's going to wrap around his, and then her little fingers like this that are going to just kind of holding on to his hand. And again, I'm not going for photorealism. I'm just going for something that resembles a hand holding on to another hand. And then if you need to modify the shape of her arm at all, feel free to do so. I'm going to give her some ears because I want her to wear some earrings. So I'm going to put a little bit of skin up in through here to give her some ears kind of just hanging down. And then for him, I'm going to do the same thing. I got a little bit of skin on the neck in through here. He's going to have his collar on his shirt is going to be a little bit higher, so I don't need to do a lot in through here. Just give it a little bit of color in through there. And then for his hand or skin on the arm, I'm going to have him wearing a shirt. So he's got, you know, a shirt coming down, a long sleeve shirt like this. So I'm just going to kind of put a little bit of a skin color in through here, which is going to represent a little bit of his wrist, and then maybe his thumb is wrapping around, and then maybe his little hand is going behind hers, or he's just holding on to the key. So something like that. And I might adjust it once I get the shirt on. If it doesn't work around the wrist, I can totally modify that. While I have this paint on my brush, I'm not going to wash it, but I am going to wipe it off just a little bit so I don't have too much paint on my brush. I'm utilizing this skin color as kind of a highlight color for the hair. So I want hers to look like she's got a little bit of her hair's kind of pulled up a little bit. So I'm just utilizing a little bit of this light color as a highlight. I want him to look like he's got a little bit of a highlight on the top of his head. So I'm really just rubbing in a little bit of this color. Now I'm going to wipe it off on my paper towel. I'm going to pick up a tiny bit of black paint so I can add shadows on the skin and on the hair as well. So I have a tiny bit of black paint on my brush. I'm going to put a little shadow over here on the left hand side of her neck. I'm going to put a little shadow down by her elbow in through here, and I want it to blend in with the skin, so I put it on there. Then I'm going to wipe my brush off on my paper towel, pick up a little bit of the skin color just to get it to blend in a little bit so it's not too much of a solid line. But you could use brown to blend it in. You could, you know, really utilize any color that will get it to blend a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit at the bottom of her arm in through here and back behind her arm just a bit. Wipe it off on my paper towel, pick up a bit of that skin color just to get it to blend in. And that'll be my process throughout these shadowy areas, is just to get that little bit of darkness on the back side and get it to blend in a bit with the skin color. And for him, I'm going to do the same thing, put a tiny bit of black on the left side of his neck, and then just get it to blend in with the skin on the right side of the neck. So black and then your skin color. And I'm going to do the same thing on the hand. So I'm going to pick up a teeny bit of black paint to give a little bit of a shadow underneath this hand in through here. Maybe that I can utilize that to reshape the arm if I need to. Then maybe a little bit of shadow in between those fingers. Maybe he's got a little bit underneath. And then I'm going to pick up, I wiped my brush off, I'm going to pick up some more of that skin color just to make sure that it kind of blends a little bit. I'm going to add a highlight in a second, but right now just kind of working on getting that main shadow on there with the skin color. And then I'm going to, for my hair, for her, I'm going to have her having like an orangey tint to her hair from that orange color, and I'm going to have his more just brown. So for her, I'm going to pick up a little bit of black with a touch of brown on my brush to get my shadowy side of the head on here. So black and brown, and I'm just kind of pulling it over to the right hand side just to get a little bit of shape to it. I'm going to do that underneath her bun as well. I want you to feel that there is some dimension to her bun, so I just put a little bit of black in there, and if you wanted to put a little swirly action in her bun, you sure can. Then I wipe my brush off on my paper towel, and I'm picking up just orange paint. And what I'm going to do with the orange is I'm going to just kind of add these little bits of the kind of just the color to her hair. So little bits of this orange is going to tell you, oh, well, her hair's not just brown, it's got this other, you know, beautiful hue to it, or maybe it's taking on some of the color from the sunset, but I'm just putting it in her hair. And then for him, I'm going to pick up a little bit of black and brown to give this shadowy area. Oh, I forgot to put color on his ears. We're going to have to give some skin color for his ears in a second. I'm going to have his hairline kind of coming down in through here, and just getting this to blend in. I'm going more down in a downward motion for the back of his hair, but you could certainly swish yours from one side to the other. Once I've got that on there, I'm not going orange for him. I'm gonna just go maybe a little bit of brown and white as my, as my little accent kind of color. Maybe a little bit more brown, something like this. I just wanna make sure that I still have that highlight on the top of his head. You could certainly add a little bit of that orange too if you wanted to, but I'm going to pick up some of my skin color to give him his ears over on the side of his head. So just a little bit of that skin color will give me some ears that he gets to hear her with. And then I just need to put a little bit of a highlight on the skin. So I'm going to use my skin color plus white on my brush. So skin color plus white. And this is just going to give me a little bit of a highlight on the edge of her shoulder in through here, just to give you that bit of form. And if you need to, you can certainly use a little bit more white or a little bit more of your skin color, whatever works for you. I'm going to do the same thing on her fingers, so maybe a little bit of lightness in through there. That might have been a little bit too much, but we'll dull that down in a second. Adding a little bit on his arm in through here. I'm going to wipe my brush off, pick up a little bit of my skin color to just get these to blend in a little bit and get her hand to work its way out a little bit more. I might end up having to make her fingers a little bit smaller here. Let me just pull this back just a bit. So I wiped my brush off, picked up a little bit of water just to get this to be a little bit smaller. There we go, that works. And then same thing with his fingers over on this side. I want them to have a little bit of highlight. So just my skin color plus a tiny bit of white so you can see them. That's really my main goal here, is to so the viewer can understand that there's two hands that are holding each other. So I would just kind of keep tweaking those until they looked as realistic as I wanted them to look. And then I would do the same thing with his neck. I would add maybe a little bit of lightness over here on the right hand side. Maybe she's got a little bit in her ears. I wouldn't do much to the left hand side because that's the shadow side to me. So if you just needed a little bit more skin color, you could add that, or you could just leave it alone, whatever is working for you. And then we're going to use the same brush for the next step. So once you've got your hands on here and you've done any little tweaks or modifications that you need to, you can wash and dry this small brush and get ready for the next step. All right, so what we're gonna do for the next step is we're gonna put some clothes on our people. We're gonna put a little decoration in her hair with maybe some earrings and shadows behind the objects, which would be the people and the key a little bit. So I'm gonna use my small brush to do this. I'm gonna be using blue, yellow, orange, white, black. And if I use any other colors, I'll let you know. So I want them to have, you know, complementary colors to their clothing, but I don't necessarily want it to be exactly like the rest of the colors that are in the painting. So I'm going to make a couple of custom colors. So for her dress and her accessories, I'm going to make myself like a teal kind of color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of my yellow. Let's see if I can put this where you guys can see it. So I'll use some of my yellow and a touch of blue. So this is blue and yellow makes green, but I'm going to make it into more of a teal type of blue. So it's going to be blue and yellow, and it's going to make it look like a different kind of green, or a different kind of green than this and a different kind of blue than that. So you could really steer this into whatever color that you'd like, but I'm just going for this pretty like aqua teal kind of color. So that's the color that I'm going to use, maybe a little bit more blue. This is the color I'm going to use as her main color for her dress and her accessories. So once you've got it into the color that you like, what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint her dress. So I am going to be, in essence, kind of doing a loose type of paint stroke, because I'm going to add some highlights and some shadows onto it, and I want it to look like it's fabric and that it's got some movement to it. So I'm really not painting this in with a really firm or solid color. I'm really just kind of getting it on here on top of that brown base so we have a good place to work from. And then once I've got it there, now I just need to add some highlights and some shadows. So my shadows are going to be over on this left hand side and maybe cinched at her waist, maybe a little bit underneath her bum, and the highlights are going to be where it bumps out the most towards the viewer. So maybe around her like back, top of her back, maybe towards the top of her bum. So I have that teal color on my brush. I'm going to pick up that with a tiny bit of black paint, and this is going to add my shadow over here on the left hand side. So again, just a loose kind of sketcherly type of brush stroke, maybe a little bit at that waistline on the right hand side, maybe a little bit coming down this left hand side, and maybe a touch under her rear end. We're going to do a shadow on the grass itself in a minute, but right now that's where I'm going for that. I'm washing and drying my brush in order to do the highlights because I don't want it to have that black in it because it'll look too gray if I do that. I picked up some of my dress color plus white, so that teal color plus white, and this is really going to make it into this beautiful color that's going to allow you to see some good dimension with that white in it, and you can really have fun with how bright you want this to be. Maybe you want yours to be really super bright and you want to show a lot of that color to it, so maybe you pull a lot of this lightness into it. That's going to be your call. Maybe you want yours to be wearing a white dress, so you can certainly have fun with the different colors that you choose for your garments. You can even bring the edges of this dress up a little bit past her shoulder if you want it to look a little bit more three-dimensional. You can give it that bit of volume to it in that direction, so feel free to have fun with that as well. I'm going to pick up a little bit more white just to give myself a little bit more thickness or areas that pop out a little bit, so I just made those a little bit whiter. I'm going to wait a second to do the shadow underneath her body because I'm going to do that at the same time with the shadow for my male, so I'm going to give that a minute here. I'm going to put some earrings on her, so I'm going to just pick up that teal color plus a little bit of white and just have some pretty complementary earrings just hanging down from her ears. I'm going to have her having this pretty decorative kind of bow in her hair as well. So I'm just bringing this down, maybe add a couple of little white, we'll call them little pearls or something that are on her beautiful head piece that's going on in through here. And then for him, I'm going to wash and dry my brush. That's about all I'm going to do for hers. I'm going to wash and dry my brush. For him, I'm going to do, again, a complementary color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use some of my orange and some of my blue. And I'm going to mix those two together. And that's going to give me like a dark kind of purple type of color. And that's the color I'm going to use for his shirt. So I've got this dark purpley, brownish, kind of bluish color, whatever, shade you decide to end with on yours. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to kind of get that base coat on here in a real loose, painterly brush stroke. Going to put it on his sleeve, going to put it all throughout both arms and the back of his shirt as well, just kind of rubbing it in there. And then once I've got that main coat on, what I'm going to do, I think I need to identify his sleeve a little bit more here. Let me just give this sleeve a little bit more identity. I'm pulling it away from the skin a little bit at that wrist, so it gives it its own, so it doesn't look like it's painted onto his wrist, so it looks like it's coming away from the wrist a little bit. And then just making sure I got some wrinkles in the shirt at the elbow there. There we go. So once I've got that on there, I'm going to start adding my shadow. So I'm picking up a touch of black with that shirt color. I'm going to have the shadow underneath his armpit and through here, a little bit more black so we can see it. So underneath this armpit and through here, just bringing this towards the right hand side, giving a little wrinkles in that shirt, something like this. And of course you can dictate where those wrinkles kind of lie by the direction that you put that brush stroke in. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow underneath this arm in through here, and maybe a little bit over here on the left hand side of the shirt, just so we can really get some good movement in through there. I'm going to put some underneath or on the back side of this arm in through here, like that. Maybe a little bit underneath. I'm going to have a collar on the shirt, so I'll put a little bit underneath there. There we go. I'm going to wash and dry my brush now. That's kind of where the majority of my shadows are going to go. I'm going to identify a collar in through here because I didn't do that before. So I'm just I picked up my shirt color, and I'm just going to kind of put this collar a little bit sticking out from that neck, something like that. And now I'm going to start picking up my shirt color plus a little bit of white in order to give myself those highlight type of areas. So I'm going to have a little bit on this arm and through here. This is going to give, I think I need a little more white so we can all see it. This is going to give you that appearance of the shape of the shirt. So I'm going to put a little bit in through here, maybe a little bit on this wrist area in through here, a touch down in through this back area. You can certainly, again, make your color whatever you want it to be. If you wanted it to look even more like it was, you know, meant to be complementary to her, you could certainly pick up some of that aqua color plus your plus his shirt color plus a little white. It just, you know, think of this as just you're having fun with it. Your intention is just to make it look like he's wearing some clothes, but it doesn't have to be any specific color. It can certainly be, you know, complementary to her shirt. It can be his own color. Maybe you make yours purple or, you know, orange. You really can have some fun with it. I'm adding a bit more highlight over onto this right hand side so we can see it a bit more. I think I need a little bit more color in it so we can really see it on top of the sky background. And then I'm just going to kind of keep tweaking it in through here until I feel like I got enough movement on it. I'm going to put a little highlight on the neck collar in a second, but just giving myself enough movement in the bottom of this shirt here. And again, we're going to put a shadow behind him in a second, but I'm just getting this on here. I'm going to put a tiny bit of a highlight on the edge of the collar so we can, now his collar's bigger, so we can see the edge of it. So I'm just adding a little bit of lightness onto my brush, a little white, and that'll give you that impression of the collar. Maybe a little bit more highlight on this shoulder to show that the light is over in that direction. And of course you can keep playing with this all you want. I'm going to add the little bit of shadow behind these objects. So I'm just going to wash and dry my brush. I'm picking up a little bit of watered down black and brown. So black, brown, and a little bit of water are on my brush. And I'm going to have my shadow right underneath the rear end in through here, and it's just going to dissipate down the hill. So I'm going to just keep adding a touch of water to my brush to make my shadow see-through, so that way it ends up, you can see the grass underneath it, and it just kind of dissipates down that hill a little bit, and it gives you the illusion of the light being on the other side of them. So black, brown, and a little bit of water are on my brush, giving me this shadow right behind their bodies. And this is where you can certainly reshape the bottom of their clothing if you wanted to. And I'm going to just kind of get this to give you the impression that it's kind of just dissipating down the hill, something like this. And I'll do a little bit for that key as well. So just going right behind this key, right in through here, and then just giving it a little bit of a shadow. You don't have to do much, just giving it the impression that there is a light source on the other side is all, you know, all we need to do. Maybe this goes down the hill in through there. And then we have one more little step to go, and it's going to be with this small brush. So once you've got your beautiful people on here, you can make any little tweaks and adjustments that you want, wash and dry this brush, and get ready for the next step. All right, so we are on to the final step. This is the final step of every painting, which is to sign it. So I'm going to use my small brush. I'm using black paint. I'm going to sign mine. I usually sign mine in the bottom left or the bottom right. I'm going to go bottom left, but I'm going to sign it within my lock. So I'm going to do it right here. I'm doing my initials, but you could certainly do your first name or the date or a symbol or whatever you'd like for your identifying mark to be is totally fine. And that is going to conclude this painting. I hope you enjoyed the process. I hope you painted yourself a very inspirational image, and I look forward to painting and sipping with you again sometime.